morning, everyone. It's so good to see you here. Please excuse me. The cats are knocking at my door. I need to go shut it a little harder. So hold on one second. Go away, you. I'm busy devotionalizing. So yes, thank you so much for joining us for daily devotions through Redeeming Life. If we haven't met before, I'm Dan. I'm the teaching pastor here, alongside Jesse, the El Padre. It's just great to be here with you all. So we're going to continue through our series on Proverbs. Today is going to focus on Proverbs 24. As I'll said before, we'll say it again. At Redeeming Life, we follow a reading plan that follows the Revive School reading plan, and it's designed to be able to lead us through the Old and New Testaments over the course of 2 years. And this past few months, we've been reading through Job and Proverbs Job, Psalms, and Proverbs. And then soon here, we're going to be jumping into Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon, which are going to be really exciting. Stay tuned for more on that. And today, we're going to focus on Proverbs 24. So if you like, Bryce or Faith, Tom, Glenn, Bree, go ahead and pause, read through Psalm 24, and then we'll unpack some devotional lessons in Proverbs 24. Yeah. Proverbs 24, like so many of the Proverbs that we've been reading and studying and picking apart, is like many of the Proverbs in this latter section of this, the section that constitutes the largest chunk of Proverbs of Solomon. It's one of the difficulties with reading it is discerning any kind of thematic structuring. How does this proverb fit to that proverb? None of them really seem to be that deep into any particular context. And remember, that's intentional, because what it's trying to get at is not guaranteed promises, but general principles that are applicable to peoples of all times, all cultures, so that what we're trying to get at is God's wisdom rooted in the fear of the Lord that is true in all times and in all places. And so because that's the case, the nugget that's there is not so neatly tucked away and packed in an immediate context. So that's one of the difficulties with reading any of the Proverbs. But there is something that I want to at least try and demonstrate for you, where the way that the Proverbs are arranged. Remember, sometimes within a given chapter, what unifies certain chapters are thematic arrangements, where there's certain words that you find repeated again and again that have a way of capping off certain chunks and putting them together and saying, here's a chunk, here's a chunk, here's a chunk, that sort of thing. Like stacking Oreos upon Oreos and taking a big bite of them. Now, one of the things that oftentimes the Proverbs will do is that it will take, as it were, certain proverbs and then sort of tug on their thematic strands and then start weaving them together elsewhere. And then they'll take, say, tugging on the thematic strands of another one, pulling it out a little bit, and then weaving it together someplace else. So that as you're reading an entire chapter, you'll catch certain words that are brought in and basically designed, as it were, to not just take this thought and this thought on their own, but to weave those thoughts together into something new. And what happens here in Psalm 24, there's first two verses, 1 and 2, and there's some tugging on that thematic strand. And then verses 13 and 14, there's some tugging on that. And that they're woven into verses 19 and 20. And I'll explain this and draw out a few principles in the meantime. It says, do not envy wicked men. Do not desire their company. For their hearts plot violence and their lips talk about making trouble. And there's a noteworthy point there with regards to our tendency to want to look at what other people have that we don't and to be envious of them and say, gosh, my life would be a whole lot better if I had those things, regardless of however it is that they got them. And sometimes it's easy to take somebody who and walk in their path, do the same things that they do, talk the way that they talk, be that sort of person because you see what they have and you want it. And the measure as to whether or not we should be following somebody is not just based upon what it is that they have, but whether or not they're an example of righteous living. And the trap for you and I is about whether or not we ever look past the surface and just looking at only what people have and say, gosh, if I could have what they have, my life would be really good. Let us not fall into that trap of simply looking at what things people have and being envious of them, because it's easy to use wickedness and wicked means and a wicked heart and as a way to seize the things that you want when you want them, how you want them. Much more difficult is it to put God first and to do the right thing and to trust him and to value him and value wisdom more than anything. And then trusting God for the things that, not just for the things that we desire, but that he transforms us to desire the right things. Do you see how that's different from being envious of the wicked? So anyway, that's one strand that he's pulling on. And then the other strand in verses 13 through 14, eat honey, my son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Know also that wisdom is sweet to the soul. If you find it, there is a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. What a marvelous image of using this this comparison of craving something that is so sweet and so delightful that hits the spot, as it were, as we like to say, and saying that's the way that we should be wanting, craving, desiring wisdom, because not only is it delightful, but wisdom, God's wisdom, rooted in the fear of the Lord, is the sort of thing that actually preserves a future hope. When we turn our attention towards God, when we make him the object of our highest affection and worship and adoration, when you can latch on to that kind of wisdom has the capacity of securing our hope, a future hope that's not going to disappoint. That's sweet, indeed. Something that if that kind of wisdom preserves that kind of hope, I want to pursue that kind of wisdom with everything that I have. So there's, you can see the envious of the wicked. There's a thematic strand there. The future hope that comes with holding on to and tasting of lasting wisdom. Follow those strands as they're leading into verses 19 through 20. It says, do not fret because of evil men, or be envious of the wicked. Do you hearing the echoes of verses 1 and 2? And it says, for the evil man has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out. Do you see how there's these two thematic strands of one of being the envious of the wicked and one of having a future lasting hope, and weaving those thoughts together into a single thought about the way in which the wicked and the wise, that is, a man whose heart is captivated and warped by sin, and another one whose heart is centered upon God and wants to actually live according to a life of holiness that actually has future hope, that these two are they're opposites. They're two ways, one way or this way or that way. As I can't remember the rapper who did it. You can get with this, you can get with that, you can get with this, you can get with that. Gosh, I'm too white. There's two different ways. But this is the profound way in which the Solomon, or the person who's composing these psalms, have a way of putting these two thoughts together, that being envious of the wicked, the reason why we're not supposed to be envious of the wicked, is that unlike the person who's righteous, is that their aims, what they've achieved by their own wicked means, are not going to last. They may have it for a time. The fruit of their wickedness, the pleasing fruit, the things that they've secured in their own hands and they have in their own grip and they've made their own, are things that are not going to last. And that everything that's around them that has made them successful is built on an unstable foundation that cannot last, indeed will not last, in that they don't have any kind of future hope, and that their future in a second, as it were, is going to be snuffed out like a candle. Gone. Forgotten, never to be remembered again. That puts me in a place where, if I'm tying those strands together, it gets me to think clearly and expansively about, it forces me to reflect on where my heart is directed. What's tugging at my heart today? In what direction? Where's the gravity of my affections and my desires and my hopes and dreams leading me today? Is it set on the wicked and the things that they have, the things that they said, I want what I want and I'm going to do whatever it is to get what I want. And I'm going to get it without any kind of regard for either my friends or my family, and certainly without regard for God. You can do that, but there's not going to be any kind of future hope for you. Not according to Psalms or the Proverbs 24. But rather, is your heart tugging you towards wisdom? To say, God, I can see that there's no future hope for the wicked, but by your wisdom, there is a future hope that's grounded in the fear of the Lord. So that, God, I want to pursue you and put you first, so that I can learn to desire the right things in the same way that my tongue is pleased and delighted at the taste of the sweetest of honeys. Ask yourself, in what direction is your heart tugging you? And I'm going to go against our conventional cultural wisdom that just says follow your heart, but take notice of where your heart is leading you. And if it's leading you towards the way of being envious of the wicked, stop dead in your tracks and say, God, I don't want to hold on to those things. Lead me in the right direction. Lord, teach me to pursue and love wisdom more than silver, more than gold, more than rubies, more than wealth, even more than an honorable name. Lord, I want to put you first today. So that's a very quick devotional on some snippets of thematic strands throughout Proverbs 24. And I want to make one last point, one last observation, and it's focusing on verses 11 and 12, which I find fascinating because it's about rescuers. Does anybody remember the Disney films, The Rescuers Down Under? And one of the things that's so much fun about those films, because they're about two mice who are members of this rescue aid society, and Bianca and Bernard. I believe Bob Newhart and Eva Gabor, who did their voices. Bob Newhart makes a great stammering mouse who's just always cautious and trying to figure things out. And there's this brave Bianca, and it's delightful characters. But what's so compelling about those stories, Rescuers and Rescuers Down Under, is not just simply the characters, but the way the story glorifies the nobility in seeing a need and taking action. When you know something has been brought to your attention, that you're willing to do what it takes to rescue, to help, to be an agent of grace. We see the way in which God has rescued us from our sins and didn't leave us in our pitiful, helpless, destructive, rebellious state. That God intervened, and he did what only he could do. He showed us grace, and he rescued us from our sins. And that sort of grace that can see people in their pitiful and sorry state and say, I can see where you are right now, but because I love you and because your life is valuable, I'm going to show you grace, and I'm going to put my hands and my feet to work to bring you out of that. And that what's so marvelous about this sort of thing is that when it comes to our daily lives and our neighbors and our friends and even strangers and enemies, that God decides to use people like you and people like me as agents of his grace, rescuers, as it were. Not that this is supposed to promote a spirit of vigilantism, where we can, go and bonk villains on the head and take a gleeful pleasure in doing so, but rather we're discerning and attentive to our surroundings, that we're capable and ready and willing to be the people that God uses to bring about salvation and hope and grace, restoration, mercy, redemption in people's lives based upon what God has done first. That's a reflection of what John says elsewhere. It says that we love because God first loved us. That the love it is that we show is a reflection of what God has loved, how God has loved us first. But pay attention to this. It says, rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay each person according to what he has done? Now, within those two verses, unpacking is a very strong theme that you'd see elsewhere about retributive justice. That if God is a God of justice who rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked, it stands true that with regards to what James says elsewhere, those who know the good they ought to do but don't do it, that's sin. This captures that thought perfectly, because maybe you, like me, it's very easy in the eyes of men to uh, dodge responsibility, skirt around accusations to say, I just didn't know. I can plead ignorance to lots of different things, so that the weight of responsibility doesn't fall squarely on my shoulders, to say, no, I actually knew what I was supposed to do and I just didn't do it. In the eyes of men, I can play the fool very, very easily. But that doesn't work with God. Our hearts are open before Him. There's nothing inside my heart of hearts, in my mind, in the deepest chasms of my cognitive capabilities, that is at all hidden from God. And that when I know the good that I ought to do, in light of God's revealed wisdom, that I cannot come before God and just say I didn't know. The God of righteousness, the God of justice, who judges rightly, does judge people according to what they do. And He can do so rightly because He can see what's in your heart and my heart. I want to encourage you, certainly do not be reckless in executing judgments of righteousness in matters or in affairs that you are not in the right to be able to interfere with. But rather, insofar as God has made a way for you to be a person, to be an agent of grace towards somebody who's stumbling towards slaughter, who's headed in a path of destruction, allow God to use you in a way that brings salvation and hope and life towards those whose lives are falling apart and are headed in a path of destruction. So that's a lot in this psalm. Gosh, we've been through the psalm so much, it just rolls off the tongue now. Proverbs 24. So thank you so much for joining us for daily devotions. If you haven't yet, go ahead and click subscribe. Follow us on this YouTube channel. We should be receiving notifications to follow along with the reading plan. I'll be excited for the time that we're able to meet together in person here at this house on Wednesdays and Sundays. And if not, then I'll see you next Thursday. So God love you all.